Chapter 7, Part 4. "Oh, don't be silly, Barney. I saw you with my own eyes, didn't I?" said Lou crossly. "You must have been there." "But I wasn't, I promise," Barney protested. "How could I have got there?" Lou said nothing for a moment. Then in a different voice she said, "I think we'd better stop playing this game. We'll only be late for the party. Let's just walk on." They went on side by side. The wood was getting really dark now, and as they went along by the fir plantation, the leopard and the hunter actually found themselves holding hands. "You know, people say they sometimes have a feeling someone's following them," Lou suddenly said in a voice that tried to be bright and ordinary. "What about it?" said Barney. "Oh, nothing," said Lou. "I suppose it's not far now to the Fork and Greens." But Barney suddenly had an idea. Lou had seen something behind an oak tree, looking like him, and now there was this feeling of being followed. Barney thought he knew what was going on, but Lou didn't, and he laughed softly to himself. "I don't see there's anything to laugh at," snapped Lou, almost tearfully. She stamped her foot. They came out at last into the lane, crossed over, and there was the entrance to the Fork and Greens drive. They could see cars parked outside the house, big ones and little ones, and lights blazed from the windows and from over the front door. Lou's eyes began to sparkle, but now Barney started to feel uncomfortable. He liked parties almost as much as Lou once they'd started, but he felt shy about going up to the big door and ringing the bell. As Lou skipped up the steps and pulled the handle, Barney took a grip on his axe and looked back along the shadowy drive. And yes, he was almost sure. Something had slipped between the two rhododendron bushes. It was what he had thought. Someone was lurking behind them. It was Stig. The front door opened and Mrs. Fork and Green stood there looking a little distracted already. Oh, you can see the picture. "Hello, do come in," she cried. "Oh, it's the puma and the caveman. How sweet of you to come, and how realistic." She sniffed a little at the animal smell that came in with them, but there was a wail from behind her and she had to turn around to the mass of children of all ages who were hurtling about the big hall or standing dumbly in corners. "Oh dear, who is it behind that mask? Lone Ranger, or is it Zorro? Please don't poke little Bo Peep with your sword, will you, dear? She's only 3 and she doesn't like it." Lou looked round excitedly at the dressed-up children. There were peasant girls and ladies from the Middle Ages, and cowboys and kings and queens and spacemen. The spaceman was already looking rather hot already, and more cowboys and Indians and squaws. But she seemed to be the only one in a real animal skin. Barney was looking at the walls of the hall. "Look at those things on the wall, Lou," he whispered. There was hardly a square foot of the wall that was not covered with trophies. Heads of gazelles and a hartebeest and gnus and bunches of spears and leather shields, racks of swords and daggers and old guns. "This is a super place," murmured Barney. "I'm jolly glad we came, aren't you?" Mrs. Fork and Green clapped her hands loudly. "Now then, children," she called, "I think we're all here, so we'll start off dancing Sir Roger de Coverley. I expect you all know it, don't you? The girls do anyway, and they can show the boys." Most of the girls began twittering with pleasure and formed themselves in a line ready to begin. But there were glum looks amongst the boys, and they stood around gasping and grasping various weapons. It was going to be that sort of party, was it? "Come on, boys, line up. Pistols, ray guns and stone axes on the oak chest, if you please." As she sat down, Mrs. Fork and Green sat down at the grand piano. The boys lined up sheepishly and the music began, and the girls hopped and skipped and the boys blundered and bumped, and everyone was rather glad when the dance came to an end. Mrs. Fork and Green had got everything well organised. After the dancing they had guessing games and acting games and sitting in a ring games, and she just handed out pieces of paper and pencils to everyone who could write, and got one of the girls to do Ring o' Roses with the Tinies when all the lights went out. "The fuses!" wailed Mrs. Fork and Green. "One of you older ones get a game going, will you? I won't be long, I hope." And she made her way into the back part of the house. There was a lot of scuffling and squeaking in the dark, only lit by the flickering flames from the big fireplace. Of course it had to be Lou who thought of something. "We'll have a leopard hunt," she said. "Give me 20 to get away, and you've all got to hunt me and put me in a cage. All right?" There were shouts of agreement. Boys scrambled for their weapons in the dark. Several people counted up to 20. Everyone shouted, "Coming!" And except for a few tiny ones who stayed by the fire, everyone scattered up the stairs and along the corridors, whooping and chattering and telling each other to be quiet. Barney was one of the first up the broad staircase and onto the dark landing. Moonlight came in through the leaded window and shone on a figure standing there. He was just going to say something to it when he noticed it was an empty suit of old-fashioned armour. But there was something coming up the stairs close behind him. He saw the headdress of the Indian chief. "Seen the leopard?" asked the Indian. "No," said Barney. "Let's go along here." They went along the corridor, and at the end there was a bare wooden staircase going up and down. "Come on up," said the Indian. They climbed the stairs, their feet making quite a loud noise on the bare boards, and found themselves almost at the top of the house. There was an unlived-in feeling up there. The Indian tried the door of a room, and it opened. There was nothing but boxes and trunks in the room, and there was a big window through which the moonlight came. "That leads onto the roof, that window," said the Indian. "I know, I've been there." "Perhaps she's on the roof, the leopard, said Barney. "Might be," said the Indian. He struggled to open the window. They both got through it, out onto the ledge with the parapet. The roof sloped up behind them. They leaned over and looked a long way down the moonlit garden. And there, in the middle of the lawn, an animal was crouching. Barney's heart gave a bump, although he knew it was only hunting for his sister. He was only hunting for his sister. "Look," he gasped to his friend. "There it is, the leopard, down there." "Crumbs!" exclaimed the Indian. "Doesn't it look real? Come on, down again, quick." They got back in through the window, bumped through the box room, clattered down the stairs and made for the main staircase, calling out, "Outside, everybody! The leopard's in the garden! Everybody out!" Hunters who had been crawling under beds and giggling in closets and wardrobes made for the staircase too, and the big door was left open and they all streamed out into the moonlit garden. "In the shrubbery!" shouted Barney. "Leopard's in the shrubbery! Let's drive it out!" Pirates, cowboys and shepherdesses piled into the shrubbery, whooping and crashing, and out of the corner of his eyes Barney saw something bolt out of the undergrowth and into the shadow of the house. "Tally-ho!" he hallooed, and sped after it along the gravel path and round the back, past the glass houses and outbuildings. He heard running feet behind him. The Indian and some other hunters were on their trail too. In front of him were two big wooden gates open and leading into a paved stable yard with buildings all around it. "In there," he panted. "I saw it go." He dashed through the gateway, and at least half a dozen others clattered in with him. "Quick, shut the gates! Don't let it out," he heard the Indian say, and the heavy wooden doors banged to behind him. But Barney stood rooted to the paving, unable to move. The other children behind him were suddenly still and silent too. The boy dressed as the Indian gave a shaky whisper. There's 2 leopards."